Hai sempre creduto nella magia o l'hai scoperta a un certo punto della tua vita? Come e quando è successo?
Okay, well, my name is Phil Hine. I've been an occultist of various descriptions for about 45 years now. I first became interested in the occult in my late teens. I didn't always think anything positive about the occult. I thought it was all rubbish until I was about, I would say, age 17 or 18. And what led to that was I was studying psychology and sociology at school, and I'd started to read the works of Carl Gustav Jung. But I didn't connect anything that Jung was uh, writing about in his books with occultism. And then one afternoon, I was sitting in the school library and I was looking through a part work, a magazine part work called Man, Myth and Magic, which was a very popular magazine in early 70s Britain. And I admit I was looking for nude pictures of witchcraft, which I think is quite normal for a 17-year-old boy. And I came across a painting by the occult artist Austin Osman Spare. And for reasons that now escape me, something about that painting triggered something in me. It kind of resonated with what I'd been reading about Jung and the collective unconscious. And I started to think, well, you know, maybe there's something in the occult after all. It's not all just mumbo jumbo nonsense. And I think that's what started me to actually begin to read occult books and later meet other occult practitioners and get started myself. So that's the simple answer. I was looking for nude pictures of witches and I found something that excited me and triggered my curiosity.
Quali cambiamenti ha portato la Chaos Magick nella tua vita e in te come persona?
For me personally, I think my involvement with Chaos Magick, my Chaos Magick practice, has made me more attentive to the everyday world, more resilient, and more open to being surprised and open to new possibilities and ideas. And I think that's one of the strengths of Chaos Magick. It's not a prescriptive system. You don't have to do it a certain way. You certainly don't have to do it in the way I write about in my book. You can find your own way. And the emphasis, or at least my emphasis, is on enjoyment and creativity.
Caos è una parola associata al disordine, ma tu la usi come acronimo di confidence, humor, attentiveness, organization, sensivity, cioè fiducia, onore, attenzione, organizzazione e sensibilità, tutte qualità di una persona che ha raggiunto un alto livello di consapevolezza. Che ruolo giocano queste qualità nella Chaos Magick e nella vita quotidiana?
Well, I think those qualities are not particular to Chaos Magick. They're obviously things that can help us navigate the everyday world that we find ourselves in. And I think, regardless of what path you're on, those are useful qualities to develop. And, they don't come easily. They're skills. We're not born with them. We develop them over time. And when I wrote Condensed Chaos, I mean, we're going back to 1995 now. I was very fond of building acronyms, and that chaos acronym is just one example of that. And I think we develop those skills not only through magical practice, but through our everyday lives. They're just things that can help us with this. Confidence doesn't grow easily. Humor, I think, is a very necessary part of our lives. I've always favored a very humorous approach to magical practice. Attentiveness, we need to attend to what's around us, what our partners are saying to us, what's happening in the world around us, and so on and so forth. these are all qualities that can help us with our everyday lives and with our magical practice, and also just how we get on in the world. So I think those are kind of like key qualities to be developed whatever magical path you're on.
Nell'immaginario collettivo, la magia viene associata soprattutto a personaggi di genere fantasy e le persone crescono spesso con l'idea che essere maghi sia un po' come essere Harry Potter, persone speciali che hanno dei poteri a differenza di altre che non li hanno, e che la magia sia un agitare la bacchetta per ottenere subito e senza sforzo alcuno tutto ciò che vuoi. Questo immaginario come incide sulla percezione di ciò che invece è davvero la magia?
Well, I think there's often a complicated relationship between, if you like, magic as it's done by practitioners and fictional representations of the magician. The idea of the magician as a special person, that the only certain people can do magic. I don't think that's true at all. I think anybody can do magic if they put their minds to it, of course. The idea that you can do anything you please without consequences, it's a nice idea, but that's all it is, really. And I think the fictional representations of magic that we find in books, films, television shows, it can hinder us, but it can also help us because it can open us to possibilities. And one of the strengths of the Chaos Magick approach is that it does not make a distinction, if you like, between fiction and non-fictional representations. It is easy to get the idea that a magician can do anything, were it that simple. It is easy to get the idea that you can do any kind of magical act you want without consequences, without, if you like, any ethical kickback. I think these are all things that we have to struggle through ourselves. Certainly when I was young, I made very little distinction between, if you like, the magical fiction I'd read and the actuality of being a practitioner. And sometimes that led me into weird experiences that I couldn't explain. And sometimes it led me down the idea that, oh, well, actually, no, there are limits to what can be done.
Ci viene insegnato, e quindi siamo abituati a credere, che la magia non esiste e che ciò che la riguarda siano solo racconti fantastici o metaforici. In che modo, secondo te, è possibile contrastare e superare questa abitudine mentale? Come cambierebbe il mondo se l'approccio venisse ribaltato e alla gente venisse insegnato sin da piccola che la magia esiste?
Well, let's take the last point first. In a lot of world cultures, people are taught that magic exists. It's just a fact of everyday life. It's only really, if you like, in the global north, in Europe and America, that this, if you like, materialist, rationalist view of the world is dominant. And I think actually it's not as dominant as some people would like to think it is, because magic is all around us. Look at the way that we anthropomorphize objects around us. We treat everyday objects, washing machines, computers, as though they were people. We personalize them. That could be seen as an act of magic. It can be difficult when you're first starting out on any form of practice to get over the idea that, oh, well, this is all just rubbish. It's a waste of time. And what a lot of magical books will tell you is, well, all you have to do is try it and you'll see that it works. And that's a very simple equation. You try out a magical practice and you get a result. Therefore, that proves that magic works. I actually don't think it's that simple. I think our relationship between our, if you like, our beliefs about the world are actually more complicated than we often allow ourselves to think about. A lot depends on how you define magic. there's Crowley's famous definition that magic is the application of will. Actually, I can't remember it very well, but it's about, applying intention into the world. So in that definition, virtually anything can be a magical act. It can be very difficult, I admit, to get over the idea that this is all mumbo jumbo and it's a waste of time. My own personal feeling is that if you do it for long enough, that entire question of whether it's real or not real just kind of like fades into the background. It might resurface at times when you're feeling less confident or depressed or your spell hasn't worked, but it's just not a question that bothers me. I guess after 45 years, it's just not, it's not a question that interests me, but maybe if you've been practicing magic into your third or fourth decade, you might find yourself in a similar way. It takes time.
Secondo te, come mai molto spesso coloro che si interessano di magia tendono ad assumere un look in qualche modo dark, un atteggiamento e un'immagine oscura e misteriosa?
Well, a lot of magicians, and I admit I've done this myself, like to feel ourselves that we are outsiders to, if you like, society. We are living on the edge. We're, transcending the material. We're pushing the envelope. We're kind of like, woo, chaos kids. And I think that's a very attractive way of living. But again, it has its limitations. In some ways, it can be seen as a kind of like post-adolescent rebellion phase. People wear a lot of black leather and have an inverted pentagram or an upside-down crucifix, and they get into this mindset that they're outsiders and that they're living on the edge and transgressing the rules of normal society. Even though that transgression mainly takes the form of buying, even more books on magic or, dressing in black clothes or whatever. And I went through a phase of that, and I took on this kind of like unemotional persona of this, super kind of like cool and disengaged adept figure. And one day, one of my friends said to me, well, you're actually a really nice person when you're not being this high and mighty magician. So why don't you just stop? And I thought, actually, she's right, And that was a big wake-up call for me. And I began to realize how I'd kind of like put myself in a dark corner as a way of not engaging with people, not kind of like paying attention to other people, not giving other people credit for their actions, and generally being an arse. So, it's okay as a phase to go through. But I think if you meet people who have been doing magic for 30 or 40 years and they're still stuck in that outsider kind of mentality, I would seriously question, really, do you still want to be like this? It's an interesting, you go through phases as you progress along the path, and I think that's a phase it's very easy to get stuck into.
Che differenza c'è tra magia bianca e magia nera? Per te esiste una differenza o è solo un'espressione del dualismo imperante che la Chaos Magick potrebbe aiutare a superare?
That's a tricky question. The idea of black magic versus white magic, it's a bit like in the cowboy films, the good cowboys wear white hats and the bad cowboys wear black hats. It's a very simple binary dualism, as you say. And I actually think magic is more complicated than that. What counts, if you look at medieval magic, a lot of medieval magic was based in necromancy, and that was seen as black magic. When chaos magic, the ideas that, if you like, form the basis of chaos magic, started to become popular in the late 70s and early 1980s, a a lot of the more traditional occultists kind of like said, oh, this is black magic, you know, this is people messing about with stuff they shouldn't be messing about with. So actually, a lot of what gets called black magic is just things that other people disapprove of. If you asked a fundamentalist Christian about occult magic, they would probably say it's all black magic. Some people make the distinction that white magic is about becoming a spiritual person, however you define that, and black magic is anything that's focused towards actually trying to create a change in the world. So, for example, white magic is advancing and transcending the normal and leaving the concerns of the material world wide, and black magic is maybe doing a spell to try and get Donald Trump out of the White House, or doing a spell to I don't know, stop your neighbor playing very loud music at 2 o'clock in the morning. So it's a very simplistic distinction that actually hides a great deal more complexity about magic in the world. And I think it has a very limited use. And one of my approaches to chaos magic is to let's question those dualities. Let's try and overcome those binaries, and if you like, walk away from them, because they can like lock us into a very simplistic understanding of a very complex world.
Nel libro ti occupi di quella che possiamo definire l'etica della magia, ossia del sistema di valori di chi ne fa uso, insistendo sulla necessità che ciascuna persona crei un sistema personale di valori e di linee guida di comportamento, piuttosto che aderire in modo più o meno acritico a un sistema esterno. Potresti approfondire questo discorso soffermandoti su come, in concreto, sviluppare dentro di sé un tale sistema?
One of the reasons that people are attracted to chaos magic is that it doesn't have, if you like, an inbuilt ethical system. It doesn't tell you what you should do or what you shouldn't do. And I know, as I said, when chaos magic first began, those ideas started to percolate. There was a lot of, if you like, flack from traditional occultists who said that this system does not have a built-in ethical philosophy. And I was kind of like, yeah, so what? Because a lot of traditional magical systems do. They tell you what you can do and what you can't do, what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Just to give you an example, which is kind of something that affected me personally, was in a lot of traditional Western systems, if you engage in politics from a magical point of view, that puts you on the left-hand path. If you're not heterosexual, if you're gay or bisexual or whatever, you're on the left-hand path, and the left-hand path is bad. And those are just two examples of the kind of attitudes, if you like, to ethics that I encountered as a young man. And, you know, both of them, I thought, you know, they're too simplistic. So I think ethics is very important. We have to, it's something worth reflecting on. It's something worth thinking about. What do I want to do? How do I want to do it? And what are my limits? And really, although I think magic can help you with an ethical system, the best way to think about ethics is to go and read some books on ethics, or talk to somebody who's if you like, a philosopher of ethics. Because we do need an ethical relation to the world. For me, magic is very much about trying to change the world more in line with how I would like to be. So I do a lot of political activism, which is as much about going out in the streets and protesting and doing magic to help that. So that's one of my ethical engagements. I try and be a more attentive, resilient, and ethical person in my personal relationships. And that's, that might not be important for everybody, but it's important for me. So this is what I mean by developing your own system of ethics. It's about how you want to live and how you want to relate to the world. And I actually don't think there's enough attention paid to that. I'd like to see more work done on magical ethics, not only in other magical systems, but also in relation to chaos magic, because it isn't really present. So that's why you have to really decide for yourself what is important for you.
Secondo te è necessario tenere separata la parte della propria vita dedicata alla pratica magica da quella che potremmo definire quotidiana? O è possibile praticare la magia anche nelle attività quotidiane? E come si può fare?
When I was writing that, I was thinking back about a lot of my own early experience with magic practice before chaos magic was around, really. And reading those texts, I very much gained the impression that magic was not really related to the everyday world. You have to set aside time to do practices. A lot of those practices are kind of like up in your head or up in the astral plane. They don't have much connection to the everyday. And something that began to fascinate me was how magic can be actually incorporated into the everyday, made part of our lives. Because magic doesn't just stop when we go out of the temple or come down off the astral plane. It's in the world around us. And I believe we need to extend our magical practice into every area of our lives. So, you can do magic whilst you're going shopping or doing the washing up. I had a friend who was interested in magic but didn't want to do all the like long, boring training regime. And I said to her, okay, well, what do you like doing? And she said, well, I go to the disco and I dance. And I said, okay, well, make that the site of your magical practice. You can do a lot of dance magic. You can, develop a magical practice around going to the disco, if you like. And she was like really happy about that, because I wasn't saying that, oh, well, you have to meditate every day at the same hour and, do a ritual every day at the same time and, develop a strong will and yada, yada, yada. But no, whatever your everyday life is, make your magical practice a part of that. Don't be cut off from it.
Come mantenere un equilibrio costruttivo tra la propria pratica magica e la vita quotidiana? Quando si ha una vita quotidiana molto piena, come si può integrare dentro di sé l'essere genitore, figlio, lavoratore, eccetera, e l'essere mago?
Well, the short answer is you don't. This again is I think a strength of the chaos approach, or it's something that I began to get very interested in and will punt at every available opportunity. You make your magic part of your everyday life, because as I said earlier, magic doesn't stop when you leave your sacred temple, when you come down off the astral plane or whatever. It's out there in the world around you, and so it should impact every part of your life. And I've met people who say, well, I work 14 hours a day, I've got kids to bring up, I can't set time aside to do special magical practices. And I said to them, well, that's okay, don't do them. Do what you can. Don't beat yourself up that you're not practicing enough. That's a trap that a lot of people get into. Oh, I'm not doing enough magical practice. Oh dear, I haven't had time to do a ritual this week. Oh, horror, And I think a lot of early books on magic tended to treat magic almost like you're at school and you have to do the exercises or the teacher will tell you off for being naughty. And, you have to work with what you have. If you work all day, I used to work about 8 or 9 hours a day for a publishing company. So I would do a lot of my magical practice either when I got up in the morning, on the train on the way to work, in my lunch break, or just walking around London. And I think you shouldn't try and separate your magical practice from your everyday life. And if your everyday life is too crammed with responsibilities, don't worry about it. Just do what you can, do what you're comfortable with. You're not in a race. You don't have to achieve great things. It's all about small steps. So, do what feels good, do what feels right.
È possibile, secondo te, compiere o avere compiuto degli atti di magia involontari, cioè di averli compiuti senza sapere che erano atti magici? E come possiamo riconoscerli?
I think so. Again, a great deal depends on what you think magic is. If you think magic is standing in a circle, wearing a robe, waving your arms about, then that's a very particular thing. But often magic can be just noticing something unusual in your environment, a chance encounter, something that leaps out and surprises you. You might walk through the woods and think you've seen a goblin or a sprite or something, and that can be an act of magic. Trying to think of a good example. I had a friend who was very interested in seeing auras. Give you an example, and he was very worried because he was fascinated by the idea of the human aura, but he felt that he lacked the psychic ability to see auras. So I said to him, well, why don't you imagine what my aura would be like? A dubious enterprise at best, but there you go. So he imagined what he said thought my aura would be like, and I said, well, then that's as good as seeing it, isn't it? So acts of imagination or acts of magic.
Ti è capitato di avere paura durante una pratica magica? E come l'hai affrontata? Che ruolo può svolgere la paura rispetto alla magia?
Back in about 1980, this was before I'd actually encountered any of the Chaos Magick texts, or at least only one of them. I went up into the hills in North Yorkshire, into a very kind of remote region of the country, and tried to conjure up one of H.P. Lovecraft's great old ones. And in doing so, I managed to scare myself shitless. I was up on top of a kind of like peaked mountain, and I did invocations and shouted and waved my hands about. This is all about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I had this vision of a beam of white light coming down out of the sky, and I just freaked out and ran away. So, I was totally in the grip of fear then. I totally lost it. I ran down the hill, ran through the village, and ended up at a friend's house in about 3 o'clock in the morning, just shaking. And that was a great experience, because up until then, I'd been doing a degree in psychology. And I tended to think that a lot of magic was just psychology, if you like, wrapped up with glittery bits. But that experience that I couldn't fit into my psychological models kind of like shook me out of just seeing magic as psychology. So, and I think that's a very useful illustration of how a shocking experience can actually lead to growth. And I think fear works like that. Sometimes you can't control being afraid. And that's a good thing, because magic is about, if you like, confronting those parts of the world that we're unfamiliar with, things that we can't explain. I'm not actually very kind of keen on explanations of magic that lean towards either quantum physics or psychology, because I like the idea that it is basically unexplainable. I don't know how it works. I just like it to keep on happening. So that's my take on fear. It can be very instructive.
Nel libro hai scritto un elenco molto efficace di ciò che la magia può offrire. Potresti dirci che cosa la magia non può offrire?
That's a very interesting question. I see a lot of people on social media at the moment going on about shadow work, which is, if you like, that comes out of a Jungian approach to psychoanalysis. And one thing I think magic is not a form of psychoanalysis. It has incorporated over the years many aspects of therapy culture, but it is not therapy. Its aims and techniques, there's some crossover. It's not therapy. It's not psychoanalysis. If you feel you need to go through therapy, go and see a therapist. You know, that's a limitation of magic, because magic tends to be an individual pursuit, and it's not geared towards, if you like, the kind of psychic integration that therapy is. Similarly, there is a lot of magic that is about healing and healing yourself and working with your own, if you like, bodily faculties. But if you're ill, go and see a doctor. You know, it has limits. It's useful for some things, other things not. So, you know, you have to be aware of that. You can't do magic. A lot of magic seems to give you the idea that you can do everything on your own. You can't. You need other people. You need other aspects. It can't cover everything. So if you're ill, see a doctor. If you think you need therapy, go and see a therapist. Magic, I don't think, can do that very well.
Per te, quali sono i punti di forza che offre la libertà di spazio e di manovra della Chaos Magick? Come accorgersi realmente che possiamo attingere dalla magia che ci circonda, indipendentemente dalla tecnica o dal sistema di credenze? E in che modo la Chaos Magick può rivelarsi utile nella vita personale e nella vita collettiva?
For me, the strengths of the Chaos Magic approach is an emphasis on creativity, however widely you want to define that, on humor, on not taking yourself too seriously, and on joyfulness, on finding out what we enjoy about the world and reveling in it. Now, what's kind of interesting is that I didn't come to Chaos Magick directly. It wasn't around when I started on my, if you like, on my occult career, for want of a better word. I started off studying, if you like, traditional Western esotericism, a Kabbalah-based system. Then I spent several years being a witch in a witch coven. And when I started to encounter Chaos Magic texts and talk to other practitioners, it gave me a tremendous feeling of freedom, if you like, because these earlier traditions that I've been involved with were very restrictive in various ways. And I like Chaos Magick's playfulness, if you like, the permission to draw things in from outside the occult horizon. Perhaps I should explain that. A lot of people who are involved in the occult don't seem to take notice of anything unless it's in an occult book. And to give you an example, this is going back to when I was involved in a Wiccan coven. They were fine with things that were in books about magic, and they were very kind of like wary of anything that wasn't, to their mind, magical. And I was studying to be a drama therapist at the time, doing lots of drama therapy group work, which I found absolutely amazing. And I'd go back to the coven and say, hey, this stuff is great. We should try this out. And they were kind of like, oh, no, we can't do that. It's not magic. And I was like, it's very magical. You know, it's working with people. It's you know, pretending to be other people. It's pretending to be animals. It's really magical. And they just couldn't see it. And for me, one of the strengths of the chaos approach was that very willingness to draw in ideas from, if you like, outside the immediate occult horizon, to bring in ideas from fiction, from popular television, comics, other disciplines. That was really amazing for me. And sometimes I've said to people, well, before you get started with Chaos Magick, maybe spend 5 or 10 years doing something else. Although, that's not, I don't think I've had many people take me up on that. And I think Chaos Magick, with its emphasis on, as I say, creativity, on personal ethics, and on just not taking yourself too seriously, these can all act as way of navigating, an extremely complex world. I like complexity. I'm not afraid of things being difficult to understand, because I think the world is difficult to understand. And anything that helps us navigate those difficulties without trapping us into simplistic models or binary thinking is great. And I think that is one of the strengths of Chaos Magick.
Delle numerose tecniche che spieghi nel libro, ce n'è una in particolare che ti sentiresti di consigliare a chi si approccia per la prima volta alla magia?
Something I would recommend is meditation. Yeah, that sounds really simple, I know, but it is. I've been meditating since I was about 16 on a daily basis. I still do it every day. I did about half an hour of meditation whilst I went out for a walk this morning. And I think meditation is a really simple way of just kind of like dropping your worries and your concerns and your hopes and your aspirations, and just being aware of the world around you, feeling the wind on your face, the grass beneath your feet, or the pavement beneath your feet, and just stopping and slowing down. And I think that is a great practice. It's very simple. You can do it anywhere. You don't have to sit in a darkened room. You can do it while you're out walking. You can do it while you're shopping. Meditation, very simple.
Rispetto agli altri modelli di magia, secondo te, quali sono i punti di forza della Chaos Magick e quali le debolezze? L'assenza di un modello strutturato nella Chaos Magick, secondo te, è un punto di forza o una debolezza?
As for the strengths and weaknesses of Chaos Magick, the strengths, as I say, are a willingness to bring in ideas from outside the occult horizon, an emphasis on playfulness and humor, because I think a lot of magicians take themselves far too seriously and don't have a sense of humor. And I think, the way to get around being that mighty magus is to make fun of yourself and make fun of your practice, because I think magic is silly at times, and you can get a great deal of satisfaction out of being silly. And a lot of magical practices are, let's face it, silly. So that for me is a strength. As I said, bringing in ideas from disciplines outside the occult. A lot of the stuff in Condensed Chaos I didn't get from, if you like, occult practice. I got them from practicing drama therapy, from doing work with improvisational theatre. The books that inspired me weren't really magical books. They were books on theatre, books on drama, drama workshops that I'd done, things like that. So, bringing things from outside the occult horizon. That's great. Now, as for the weaknesses, well, chaos magicians very quickly got the reputation of, if you like, being critical of other paths. So, Thelema is dogmatic, Wicca is made up, Chaos Magick is best, kind of thing. And what chaos magicians tend not to be, in my experience, is self-critical, or critical is, if you like, the weaknesses inherent in Chaos Magick. And I think one of those weaknesses is a tendency to dismiss religious traditions. A lot of chaos magicians I know are very anti-religion. I think that can be a weakness. A lot of people are very kind of like pro, if you like, a quantum physics model of how magic works. Personally, I have no interest in quantum physics, so I'm not interested in that. I think keeping an open mind is a very necessary thing, whatever magical path you're on. And keeping curious, not limiting yourself to one explanation, because sometimes the things that we seem to be getting involved with almost defy explanations, and explanations can become traps because we limit ourselves by thinking there's a limit on what this particular technique can do. And I think another weakness is this almost kind of like extreme relativism that you find in some aspects of chaos magic, that, oh, well, you know, everything is the same as everything else. Culture doesn't matter. Some other chaos magic authors, not really me, but some other people have come up with this idea that magic is the same everywhere. The cultural trappings don't matter. And I really disagree with that. I think culture is extremely important, and it does matter. You know, we can't just say, oh, everything's the same. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's all the same process. I think culture and society shape magic in different ways, and we should be attentive to that. So that, I think, is a weakness. As for this idea of structured systems, as I said earlier, I didn't come to chaos magic directly. It wasn't even around when I began to get involved in the occult. And I think some people do find the lack of a, if you like, a structure very difficult. And if that's the case, you know, just don't bother with it. Go and find something with a structure that, you know, suits you better. If you like, you know, being a free-form magician and just messing about and not being on a spiritual path, or not being guided by particular structural principles like you might find in, say, Kabbalah or witchcraft, then don't bother with chaos magic. You know, it's not for everyone. Nowadays, what we find is that a lot of chaos magic ideas that are actually percolating into those traditional systems. So there's a thing called chaos witchcraft, and I've seen people writing books on Kabbalah that have got chaos magic elements blended into them. So that's kind of very interesting, that what were once perceived as different magical currents are all kind of like meshing together, sometimes successfully, sometimes perhaps less so successfully. But really, what matters is what you emotionally engage with, what feels like a good fit with you. So, you know, choose the path that suits you. I spent 7 years being a Wiccan and had a great time, but in the end moved on and got involved with chaos magic. I was involved with chaos magic for about, let me think, maybe 10 or 12 years. And then I moved on to something else. And that's fine. People do that. You know, as we go through our lives, what becomes important to us in all aspects of our lives changes. So chaos magic might be a stepping stone for you to something else.
Secondo te, quali sono i più grandi rischi che si possono correre praticando la magia? In che modo la Chaos Magick può essere utile nella gestione di questi rischi?
For me, one of the big stumbling points, as I've said throughout this interview, is taking yourself too seriously. You know, thinking of yourself as some high and mighty adept that doesn't deal well with the everyday world. I remember talking to this chap I knew a few years back, and he was bemoaning the fact that he had to go to the post office and, you know, interact with normal people. And he said, oh, it's terrible. I have to go to the post office and, You know, all these muggles, non-spiritual people are around me. You know, what should I do? And I said, well, I think you're up your own arse, mate. You know. And in the end, his solution was he got his wife to do it. And I just thought, you know, this idea that you're a mighty magician, but you can't go down the shops, it's a little bit telling, don't you think? So keeping a sense of proportion, not taking it too seriously. I think that's a big thing. It was a big thing for me. I know when I stopped taking myself too seriously, I just felt a lot, you know, better, a lot more, if you like, grounded in the real world, for want of a better word. Another thing is, I think, paying attention to other people. I think that's very important. I spent a lot of time up in my own head, totally infused with my own brilliance. And I realized that, you know, I wasn't talking to people, I was talking at them. And people would be going, oh God, here comes Phil Hine again. He's going to lecture us on how brilliant he is. And I realized that, you know, if I wanted to, for want of a better word, have a good life, I had to pay attention to what people were saying and not just, you know, be inside my head and having conversations with myself all the time, because that's very easy to do when you get into magic. It almost becomes like an obsession. And that can be fine. It can be productive, but in the end, I think it cuts you off from other people.
Nel libro parli degli spiriti dei nuovi elementi che si aggiungono a quelli classici di aria, acqua, terra e fuoco. Secondo te, la magia in che rapporto è con il progresso tecnologico di questi ultimi decenni? Dovrebbe tenerne conto o rimanere fedele a quanto proviene dalla tradizione?
Okay, well, it's, you know, if you read books on magic, you'll see there's a kind of like 5 or 4 element structure: earth, air, fire, water, space sometimes. When I started to get interested in chaos magic, I just thought, well, what about electricity? What about nuclear power? What about petrol? You know, is there a kind of like magical equivalent of all these things? I guess I was being a bit silly, but I just start thinking, you know, well, if there are spirits of fire and spirits of water, then surely there are spirits that hang around, you know, badly insulated electrical sockets. Why is it that cars always seem to stop in the middle of nowhere? You know, magic has sometimes, I think, a convoluted relationship with modernity. And one thing that a lot of chaos practitioners became very interested in, myself included, was kind of like extending, if you like, our magical models to embrace modernity. You know, to see the computer as a magical instrument, which it is. I mean, computers are very, very magical. And I speak as someone who's spent many years working as an IT technician. You know, to give you a silly example, very often I'd get rung up by somebody in another department and say, "Oh, my computer stopped working," and I just wander up to the computer and, you know, lay hands on the keyboard or do some keyboard jiggery pokery that he wasn't aware of, and hey presto, it would work. And he'd say, "How did you do that?" And I say, "It's magic," you know. Which sometimes it kind of seemed to be, because I wasn't really conscious of actually doing anything to make the bloody thing work, but it got better, you know. And equally, I've met people who have, if you like, a negative effect on computers. You know, they wander into a server room and the lights blow out. You know, they seem to have a kind of like, you know, anti-computer effect. All the computers shut off when they come in. So again, one of the, if you like, the strengths of chaos magic is to look at how the world has changed and incorporate aspects of that change within its kind of like grasp, if you like. And that includes bringing in ideas from fiction, you know, this idea of working with gods from TV shows or from comics. You know, are they as much valid as, you know, proper religious figures or proper mythology? That's up for you to decide. But at least Chaos Magick embraces that. And I think that's a very creative approach. And I don't think we can, you know, some magical systems seem to have kind of like ossified around the beginning of the 20th century and don't seem to have kind of like updated themselves for the world of, you know, digital communication that we find ourselves in now. And I think we need to do that and keep doing it, you know.
Cosa ne pensi dei social network? Che relazione hanno con la magia?
They've changed how we communicate. Some people say, oh, well, they're evil. You know, we spend far too much time arguing with people, presenting ourselves in a very hyped up way. Oh, I've done this wonderful thing. I'm going to share it with my Twitter followers. Oversharing. Oh, I'm really ill. You know, please help me. Whatever. I mean, but, you know, social networks, I think, again, are a phenomena that we shouldn't shy away from as magical practitioners. And I think the interesting thing about social networks is it's on things like Twitter. I don't go on TikTok, so I'm not really a video person, but on things like Twitter and Facebook, all we have is words. And if we can accept, if you like, the magical perspective, words have power, then it behoves us to use words carefully. And I think that is a magical act. I've had some amazing conversations through words with people on Twitter. We've shared magical ideas, we've argued, you know, but I try and treat people with respect, even if I violently disagree with what they're saying. You know, words are all we have. If you accept that words have power, then we need to be, if you like, learn to be gentle with each other, even though that's sometimes really difficult to do. And I have made an ass of myself on social media more than once, just by being not entirely attentive. Waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going on Twitter and arguing with people, not really a good idea, Phil. So I think we in some ways we haven't really, you know, it's social media has become rapidly part of our everyday life, but we haven't really thought it through as a magical act yet. And I think a lot of those word-based interactions can be seen as magical acts, and that behooves us to be attentive, be observant, be sensitive, you know, be humorous and be confident. That's the qualities of chaos all over again. So that's what I think about social media.